The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the darkness between star systems. It was the size of a small moon, built by dozens of alien species working together. Today, the station buzzed with excitement. Ships from across the galaxy had come for the annual weapons exhibition of the Galactic Council. Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked through the crowded hallways of the station. She was a tall woman with short gray hair and calm brown eyes. Her simple blue uniform stood out among the colorful robes and strange clothing of the alien visitors. She carried a wooden crate in her arms, nothing fancy or high-tech about it. The main exhibition hall was enormous. It stretched for miles in every direction, with a ceiling so high it disappeared into shadows. Hundreds of displays filled the space, each one showing off the latest military technology from different worlds. Bright lights flashed, energy weapons hummed with power, and holographic displays showed devastating explosions from past battles. Elena stopped at the human display area. It was much smaller than the others, tucked away in a corner like an afterthought. A simple metal table and 2 chairs were all the furniture they had been given. She set down her wooden crate and opened it carefully. "What do we have here?" a voice said behind her. Elena turned to see Admiral Krikstal approaching. He was a Zephyrian, standing 8 feet tall with blue-scaled skin and 4 arms. His military uniform was covered in medals and rank symbols. His yellow eyes looked down at Elena with obvious amusement. "Just our contribution to the exhibition," Elena replied politely. She lifted the weapon from the crate and placed it on the table. It looked ancient compared to everything else in the hall. The metal was dull and scratched, with cables and mechanical parts visible on the outside. It was clearly built by hand, not grown in some alien factory. Admiral Krikstal stared at the weapon for a moment, then burst out laughing. His laughter was loud and harsh, echoing through the nearby displays. Other aliens began to gather around, curious about what was so funny. "This is your advanced military technology?" Krikstal asked, still chuckling. "It looks like something from a museum. What does it do, throw rocks?" "Actually, yes," Elena said calmly. "It throws things very fast." This made Krikstal laugh even harder. Soon more aliens joined the crowd. Dr. Velthari arrived, floating a few feet off the ground in her energy field. She was an ethereal, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow from within. Her large black eyes studied the human weapon with scientific curiosity mixed with disappointment. "Fascinating," Dr. Velthari said in her musical voice. "The humans still use kinetic projectiles. How wonderfully primitive. We abandoned such crude methods thousands of years ago." A group of Mantari soldiers clicked their mandibles in what Elena knew was their version of laughter. Their insect-like faces showed clear amusement as they examined the railgun with their compound eyes. Even the peaceful Deltans, who rarely spoke badly of anyone, whispered among themselves and shook their heads. "May I ask what this device is supposed to accomplish?" Dr. Velthari inquired, her tone the same one might use when speaking to a child. "It accelerates dense projectiles using electromagnetic force," Elena explained. "The projectile reaches very high speeds before leaving the barrel." "Electromagnetic force?" Admiral Krikstal repeated. "You mean like the primitive magnetic levitation our ancestors used for cargo transportation? Surely you jest." "No joke," Elena said. "This particular model is from one of our old battleships. It served in the Titan War about 400 years ago." The crowd of aliens grew larger. Word was spreading through the exhibition that the humans had brought something hilariously outdated to show off. Representatives from dozens of species came to see for themselves. The laughter grew louder. 400 years old? Dr. Velthari asked in amazement. "And you consider this suitable for a modern weapons demonstration? Our latest phase disruptors can remove matter from existence itself. The Zephyrian plasma lances can melt through any known material. The Corvin gravity weapons can crush entire fleets. And you bring us a museum piece that throws metal?" Elena nodded patiently. She had expected this reaction. Humans were still considered newcomers to galactic civilization, despite having been part of the Council for over 2 centuries. Most species viewed them as technologically backward, useful mainly for manual labor and simple manufacturing. "Perhaps," Admiral Krikstal said, his voice dripping with false kindness, "the humans would prefer to simply observe this year? There is no shame in admitting when one is outclassed. We could arrange for you to watch from the viewing area while the real militaries demonstrate their capabilities." "Thank you for the offer," Elena replied, "but we would like to participate." The Admiral's expression shifted from amusement to something approaching pity. Very well. But surely you understand that this exhibition is meant to showcase cutting-edge military technology, weapons that could actually be useful in modern warfare, not antiques from primitive civilizations? Elena felt her jaw tighten slightly, but she kept her voice level. I understand the purpose of the exhibition perfectly, Admiral. Our weapon may look old, but I assure you it functions exactly as designed. Dr. Velthari floated closer, her energy field making the air shimmer around her. Perhaps you do not fully comprehend what you are competing against, Ambassador. My people's phase disruptors operate by shifting matter into parallel dimensions. The target simply ceases to exist in our reality. There is no explosion, no debris, no residual energy. Complete annihilation on a quantum level. Impressive, Elena acknowledged. And our plasma lances, Admiral Krixtal added proudly, generate temperatures exceeding those found in stellar cores. They can cut through the armor of a dreadnought like it was paper. The energy output of a single shot could power a small city for a year. Elena nodded again. She had studied the military capabilities of every major species before coming here. She knew exactly what she was up against. A new voice joined the conversation. The human's persistence is admirable if misguided. The speaker was General Thekvar of the Hegemony, a massive creature that looked like a walking mountain of rock and metal. His people were known for their incredibly durable armor and defensive technology. Our kinetic barriers can stop projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed. What chance does an ancient magnetic launcher have against such defenses? Elena looked around at the crowd of aliens surrounding her table. Their expressions ranged from amused condescension to outright mockery. She had dealt with this attitude for years, ever since humanity had first made contact with galactic civilization. Most species saw humans as primitive upstarts who had stumbled into space travel by accident. Well, she said finally, I suppose we will find out during the demonstration. Admiral Krixtal's eyes lit up with sudden interest. Are you suggesting a formal challenge, Ambassador? A direct comparison between your antique and our modern weapons? Elena met his gaze steadily. If you are willing to participate in such a test, Admiral, then yes. I formally challenge the assembled representatives to a weapons demonstration contest. The crowd fell silent for a moment. Then Admiral Krixtal smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Challenge accepted, Ambassador. This should be most entertaining. Dr. Velthari clapped her hands together softly. How delightful. We shall finally put to rest any lingering doubts about humanity's place in the galactic hierarchy. Elena smiled back at them, her expression calm and confident. I look forward to it. News of the challenge spread through Nexus Prime like wildfire. Within hours, every major news network in the galaxy was broadcasting updates about the upcoming weapons demonstration. The story was irresistible. Primitive humans challenging the most advanced military powers in known space. Elena stood in her small quarters aboard the human diplomatic ship, watching the news reports on her wall screen. The commentators were having a field day with the story. A Corvin reporter with purple tentacles waving excitedly called it the most one-sided military contest in galactic history. A Deltran news anchor, usually known for balanced reporting, described the human challenge as either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. The door chimed, and Elena's aide, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, entered with a datapad. Sarah was younger than Elena, with black hair tied back in a neat bun and worried brown eyes. The demonstration has been scheduled for tomorrow at 1400 station time, Sarah reported. The Council has designated Testing Base 7 for the event. They are expecting quite a crowd. How big a crowd? Elena asked. Every ambassador on the station, plus their military advisors. The major news networks are sending their top reporters. Oh, and Admiral Krixtal has invited observers from 12 additional species who happen to be in the area. Apparently word has reached the outer systems. Elena sighed. She had hoped for a quieter demonstration, but that was clearly not going to happen. What about the testing parameters? Sarah consulted her datapad. Standard Council protocols. 3 different target types. Energy barriers, composite armor plating, and adaptive defensive systems. Each participant gets to demonstrate against all 3 targets. The alien representatives have already agreed to the format. And they still think this is going to be easy. Admiral Krixtal was quoted this morning saying it would be educational for the humans to see what real military technology looks like. Dr. Velthari told reporters she hoped the demonstration would encourage humanity to focus on areas where they might actually contribute to galactic civilization, like agriculture or basic manufacturing. Elena shook her head. The arrogance of these species never ceased to amaze her. They had been in space for thousands of years longer than humans, and they had never let humanity forget it. Every interaction was colored by their assumption that newer meant inferior. What about our preparations? Elena asked. The railgun has been transported to the testing bay and secured. I have run full diagnostics 3 times. Everything is functioning perfectly. The tungsten rods are ready, and I have calculated the optimal power settings for each target type. Elena nodded. Sarah was one of the best weapons engineers in the human fleet, despite her young age. If she said the railgun was ready, then it was ready. Any word from Earth Command? Admiral Harrison sends his regards and his confidence. He also wanted me to remind you that you have full authorization to reveal any technical specifications you deem necessary. That was important. Elena had been wondering how much detail to share about human military capabilities. The answer apparently was whatever it took to make their point. The next morning, Elena arrived at Testing Bay 7 early. The bay was enormous, designed to safely test weapons that could level city blocks. Thick, transparent aluminum walls separated the testing area from the observation deck. Energy dampeners and force fields provided additional protection for spectators. The targets had already been set up in the testing area. The first was a standard energy barrier, the kind used by most species to protect their ships and installations. It shimmered with blue light, powerful enough to stop anything short of a direct hit from a battleship's main guns. The second target was a wall of composite armor plating, 3 feet thick and made from materials harvested from a dozen different worlds. It was the same type of armor used on heavy cruisers and fortress stations. The dark metal seemed to absorb light, and Elena knew it was designed to distribute impact forces across its entire surface. The third target was the most impressive. An adaptive defensive system that could analyze incoming threats and adjust its defenses accordingly. It looked like a cluster of crystalline structures that shifted and moved constantly. Never quite the same shape twice. Elena had read about these systems but had never seen one in person. The observation deck was packed with spectators. Elena counted representatives from at least 30 different species, plus their military advisors and scientific staff. Camera drones floated throughout the area, broadcasting the event to billions of viewers across the galaxy. Admiral Krixtal approached Elena with his characteristic swagger. He had brought his own weapon for the demonstration, a plasma lance that hummed with barely contained energy. The weapon was a work of art, with flowing curves and crystalline focusing elements that caught the light. "Ambassador Vasquez," he said with a predatory smile, "are you prepared to begin?" "Ready when you are, Admiral." Dr. Velthari glided over, her phase disruptor floating beside her in its own energy field. The weapon looked more like a piece of abstract sculpture than a military device. Swirling patterns of light moved across its surface, and reality seemed to bend slightly around it. "Shall we determine the order of demonstration?" she asked. "I suggest the humans go first so they can see how this should be done." "Actually," Elena said, "I would prefer to go last if that is acceptable to everyone." Admiral Krixtal laughed. "Saving the best for last? How optimistic." "Very well, Ambassador. We shall demonstrate what real military technology can accomplish, and then you can show us your antique." General Thekvar had also joined the demonstration. His weapon was a gravitational manipulator that could crush targets by increasing local gravity by several thousand times. It was built into his arm armor, looking like it had grown there naturally. The demonstrations began with Dr. Velthari. She positioned herself at the firing line and activated her phase disruptor. The weapon sang with harmonic frequencies that made Elena's teeth ache. She aimed at the energy barrier and fired. The effect was instantaneous and disturbing. The energy barrier simply stopped existing. There was no explosion, no flash of light, no debris. One moment there was a powerful defensive field. The next moment there was empty space. The phase disruptor had shifted the barrier into a parallel dimension where it could not affect their reality. The crowd in the observation deck murmured with appreciation. Several alien reporters spoke rapidly into their recording devices, describing the elegant demonstration of advanced ethereal technology. Admiral Krixtal stepped up next, his plasma lance charged with a sound like distant thunder. When he fired at the composite armor plating, the result was spectacular. A beam of superheated plasma, hotter than the core of a star, struck the armor and began cutting through it like a knife through butter. Molten metal sprayed in all directions and the air shimmered with heat distortion. Within seconds, the 3-foot-thick armor had been reduced to slag. The crowd cheered and applauded. Admiral Krikstal bowed graciously, clearly enjoying the attention. General Thekvar's demonstration was the most subtle but perhaps the most impressive. He aimed his gravitational manipulator at the adaptive defensive system and activated it. The crystalline structures began to distort and compress as local gravity increased dramatically. The adaptive system tried to compensate, shifting its configuration rapidly, but it could not adapt to the fundamental force of gravity itself. With a sound like breaking glass, the entire system collapsed into a dense ball of compressed matter. More cheers from the observation deck. Elena noticed that several military advisors were taking detailed notes, probably analyzing the weapon's capabilities for their own forces. Now it was Elena's turn. She walked to the firing line where the ancient railgun waited for her. Compared to the elegant alien weapons, it looked crude and primitive. The metal was scratched and dented from centuries of use. Cables and mechanical components were visible on the outside, giving it a rough industrial appearance. Elena opened a case and removed a tungsten rod about the size of her thumb. It was perfectly smooth and incredibly dense, weighing several pounds despite its small size. She loaded it into the railgun's chamber and began the charging sequence. The weapon hummed as its capacitors filled with energy. Elena could feel the electromagnetic field building, making the hair on her arms stand up. Several nearby instruments began to flicker and beep warnings about magnetic interference. In the observation deck, she could hear aliens laughing and making jokes about the primitive human technology. Someone mentioned that the weapon looked like it belonged in a museum. Another voice suggested that humans should stick to simpler pursuits. Elena finished the charging sequence and aimed at the restored energy barrier. The railgun was ready to fire. "This should be amusing," Admiral Krikstal said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I wonder if the projectile will even reach the target." Elena squeezed the trigger. The railgun fired with a sound that no one in the testing bay was prepared for. It was not the clean hum of energy weapons or the controlled roar of plasma discharge. It was thunder given physical form. A crack of noise so powerful it seemed to split reality itself. The electromagnetic pulse was so intense that every piece of electronic equipment in the bay flickered or shut down completely. Elena felt the recoil push through the floor and up into her bones. The railgun's magnetic coils had accelerated the tungsten rod through a series of precisely timed pulses, each one adding more velocity until the projectile reached speeds that made mockery of conventional physics. For a fraction of a second, nothing seemed to happen. The tungsten rod was moving so fast it was invisible, just a distortion in the air like heat shimmer. Then it hit the energy barrier. The barrier did not gradually weaken or slowly give way. It exploded. The energy field that had taken considerable power to maintain was overwhelmed instantly by the kinetic force of the projectile. Blue light flashed and died as the tungsten rod punched through without even slowing down. The rod hit the replacement composite armor plating next. The 3-foot-thick wall that had required Admiral Krikstal's stellar temperature plasma to slowly cut through simply ceased to exist where the projectile passed. There was no gradual penetration, no resistance. The tungsten rod created a perfectly round hole and kept going. The adaptive defensive system was the third target. Its crystalline structures began to shift and change as soon as the railgun fired, trying to configure themselves to stop the incoming projectile. The system had been designed to counter energy weapons, particle beams, and even exotic matter streams. It had never encountered anything like a chunk of metal moving at relativistic speeds. The tungsten rod hit the adaptive defense and shattered it completely. Crystalline fragments scattered in all directions as the projectile passed through the space where the system had been trying to form a barrier. The rod's passage was so violent that it created a shockwave in the surrounding air. But the tungsten rod was not finished. Behind the 3 targets was the testing bay's rear wall, constructed of the same super-strong materials used to build the station's hull. The projectile punched through this barrier as easily as it had destroyed the targets. Emergency alarms began to sound as the station's automatic systems detected a hull breach. Elena watched through the transparent aluminum as the tungsten rod continued its journey into space. Emergency force fields activated to seal the breach, but tracking sensors followed the projectile as it moved away from the station. It was still traveling at tremendous speed, its path taking it toward the outer edge of the star system. The observation deck was completely silent. Every alien in the room stared at the destruction in the testing bay with expressions of shock and disbelief. The 3 targets had been reduced to debris in less than a second. The rear wall had a perfectly round hole through it. Emergency crews were already moving to repair the damage. Admiral Krickstall's mouth hung open. His plasma lance, so elegant and powerful just minutes before, suddenly seemed inadequate. He had watched his weapon slowly cut through armor plating. But the human railgun had destroyed everything in its path without hesitation. Dr. Velthari's energy field flickered and wavered as her concentration failed. Her large black eyes were fixed on the hole in the station's hull. Her phase disruptor, capable of removing matter from existence itself, had only affected the single target she aimed at. The human weapon had destroyed everything between it and open space. Impossible, General Tekvar rumbled, his rocky voice filled with disbelief. No kinetic weapon should be able to penetrate our adaptive defenses. The system was designed to counter projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed. Elena began shutting down the railgun systems, her movements calm and methodical. The tungsten rod was traveling at approximately 12% of light speed when it left the barrel. She said matter-of-factly, "Your adaptive system probably would have been effective against slower projectiles." 12% of light speed? Dr. Velthari repeated in a whisper. That is relativistic velocity. The kinetic energy involved would be... She stopped speaking as she performed the calculations in her head. Elena could see the exact moment when the ethereal scientist realized the true implications of what she had just witnessed. The energy output, Dr. Velthari continued slowly, would exceed anything we saw from the other weapons. By several orders of magnitude, Elena nodded. Kinetic energy increases with the square of velocity. Small improvements in projectile speed result in dramatic increases in destructive power. Admiral Krickstall found his voice again. But the power requirements to accelerate matter to such speeds must be enormous. How do you generate that much energy? The railgun's capacitor banks store energy over several minutes, Elena explained. We convert stored electrical power into kinetic energy very efficiently. No energy is wasted on exotic particle generation or dimensional manipulation. Sarah Chen appeared at Elena's side with a datapad. She had been monitoring the weapon's performance from the control booth. All systems nominal, she reported. No damage to the railgun itself. Ready for additional demonstrations if required. The aliens in the observation deck began talking among themselves in urgent whispers. Elena caught fragments of conversations in various languages. But the tone was universal. Shock, concern, and rapid reassessment. A Corvan military advisor with purple tentacles was speaking rapidly into a communication device, probably reporting back to his home fleet. A group of Deltran scientists had gathered around a portable computer, running calculations and comparing data. Even the peaceful Lumari, who rarely involved themselves in military discussions, were engaged in heated debate. Ambassador, Admiral Krickstall said finally, his voice lacking its earlier confidence, "This weapon you have demonstrated. Is it representative of current human military technology?" Elena considered her answer carefully. This particular railgun is 400 years old, as I mentioned. It was retired from active service and donated to the Terran Military Museum. We borrowed it for this demonstration. The implications of her words hit the assembled aliens like a physical blow. If this devastating weapon was a museum piece, what were current human military capabilities like? Dr. Velthari floated closer, her energy field agitated and unstable. You are saying this is obsolete technology? That your current weapons are more advanced than this? Significantly more advanced, Elena confirmed. This model has several design limitations that were resolved in later versions. The charging time is too long, the barrel life is relatively short, and the targeting system is purely mechanical. Modern human kinetic weapons address all of these issues. General Tekvar's rocky features arranged themselves into what might have been concern. And these modern weapons, they are deployed with your military forces? Standard equipment on all human vessels cruiser class and above, Elena said. Smaller ships carry scaled-down versions. Even our patrol boats mount kinetic weapons more advanced than this demonstration model. The crowd in the observation deck was growing more agitated by the minute. Elena could see alien military officers frantically taking notes and sending urgent messages. Several delegations had already left the viewing area, probably to report to their respective governments. A new voice cut through the murmur of conversation. Ambassador Vasquez. Elena turned to see Council Representative Zektar approaching. He was a Nexari, with crystalline skin that reflected the lights of the testing bay. As one of the senior members of the Galactic Council, his words carried significant weight. Representative Zektar, Elena acknowledged with a polite nod. I believe we need to discuss certain aspects of human military capabilities, he said carefully, perhaps in a more private setting. Elena glanced at the crowd of aliens, many of whom were still staring at the hole in the station's hull. I think that would be wise, Representative. Indeed. The council chamber is available immediately if you are willing. Elena began packing the railgun components back into their cases. I will be there in 10 minutes. As she worked, she could hear the continuing conversations around her. The tone had shifted completely from the mockery and condescension of the previous day. Now the aliens spoke in hushed, serious voices about threat assessments, defensive capabilities, and the need to recalculate their military strategies. Admiral Krixtal approached as Elena finished packing. His earlier arrogance had been replaced by something approaching respect. Ambassador, I owe you an apology. I underestimated your people and their capabilities. Apology accepted, Admiral, Elena replied. We all make assumptions based on our experiences. Indeed, perhaps the Zephyrian Republic would be interested in discussing mutual defense agreements with Earth, in the interest of galactic stability, of course. Elena smiled. I am sure our diplomatic corps would be happy to open such discussions. As she left the testing bay, Elena could hear similar conversations starting throughout the observation deck. Species that had dismissed humanity as primitive newcomers were suddenly very interested in establishing friendly relations. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted in the space of a single demonstration, and everyone was scrambling to adapt to the new reality. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened within 2 hours of the weapons demonstration. Elena sat at the human delegation's table in the center of the vast circular chamber, surrounded by representatives from 47 different species. The atmosphere was tense, filled with urgent whispers and the clicking, buzzing, and humming of various alien languages. Council Representative Zektar called the session to order. His crystalline features reflected the chamber's lights as he addressed the assembly. We are here to discuss the implications of today's demonstration and to reassess certain military classifications. Elena had expected this meeting. The Galactic Council maintained detailed threat assessments for every member species, and humanity's rating had clearly been wrong. Very wrong. Dr. Velthari was the first to speak. She had recovered from her initial shock, but Elena could see that the ethereal scientist was deeply troubled. Honorable Council, my analysis of the human weapon's performance indicates energy levels that exceed our previous estimates by 3 orders of magnitude. The projectile created exotic matter interactions during impact that we have only observed in stellar phenomena. General Thekvar leaned forward in his specialized chair. Designed to support his massive rocky frame, the penetration capabilities demonstrated today render most current defensive systems obsolete. My people's kinetic barriers, which can stop projectiles at significant fractions of light speed, were completely bypassed. Elena listened to the discussion without comment. The aliens were struggling to understand not just the technical aspects of what they had witnessed, but the strategic implications. For centuries, galactic military doctrine had been based on energy weapons and exotic physics. The idea that simple kinetic projectiles could be so devastatingly effective challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare. Admiral Krixtal stood to address the chamber. His earlier arrogance had been replaced by grim professionalism. The Zephyrian Republic has completed a preliminary tactical analysis. If the demonstrated weapon represents standard human military equipment, then previous threat assessments were catastrophically inadequate. Representative Zektar consulted his datapad. According to our records, humanity was classified as a Class 3 military power. Species in this category are considered capable of defending their home systems, but lacking in significant offensive capabilities. That classification was based on outdated information, Elena said, speaking for the first time since the session began. Human military doctrine has evolved considerably since our initial contact with galactic civilization. A Corvan representative with purple tentacles waved for attention. Ambassador Vasquez, our intelligence services have monitored human fleet movements for decades. We have never observed weapons of this magnitude being deployed. Elena nodded. Human starships carry kinetic weapons as standard armament, but we have never had reason to use them at full power. Most conflicts in this region of space have been resolved through diplomacy or limited engagements. Limited engagements? Dr. Velthari asked. Are you saying your ships have been operating under artificial constraints? We follow galactic conventions regarding the use of force, Elena replied carefully. Human military doctrine emphasizes proportional response and minimizing collateral damage. Our ships carry weapons suitable for any level of conflict, but we use only the minimum force necessary to achieve our objectives. The chamber fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. The aliens were realizing that humanity had been deliberately holding back in their previous military encounters. What they had considered full-scale human military operations had actually been limited police actions. A Deltran scientist spoke up from the back of the chamber. Ambassador, could you clarify the relationship between the weapon demonstrated today and your current military technology? You mentioned that the railgun was obsolete. Elena had been dreading this question, but she had been authorized to share certain information. The demonstration weapon was a Mark 7 railgun, retired from service approximately 50 years ago. Current human vessels carry Mark 15 and Mark 16 systems, with experimental Mark 17 weapons undergoing final testing. General Tekvar's rocky features shifted into what Elena recognized as his species' expression of concern. And these newer weapons, they are more powerful than what we witnessed today? The Mark 15 system fires projectiles at roughly 30% of light speed, Elena said. The Mark 17 experimental weapons approach 40%. They also incorporate improved targeting systems, faster charging times, and enhanced projectile design. The chamber erupted in urgent conversations. Elena could see alien military advisors frantically calculating the implications of her revelations. Weapons that could accelerate matter to 40% of light speed would release energy comparable to small nuclear devices, but with none of the defensive countermeasures that had been developed against conventional explosives. Representative Zektar called for order. Ambassador Vasquez, the Council needs to understand the full scope of human military capabilities. How many vessels in your fleet carry these advanced weapons? Elena consulted her own datapad, though she already knew the numbers by heart. Every human starship larger than a patrol boat carries kinetic weapons. Our current fleet consists of approximately 12,000 vessels, including 237 ships of the line. The number sent another wave of shock through the chamber. Most species maintained fleets of hundreds of ships, not thousands. The idea that humanity had over 200 capital ships, each armed with weapons that could devastate planets, was almost incomprehensible to the assembled aliens. Admiral Krixtal stood again. Ambassador, with respect, these numbers seem inconsistent with our observations of human space traffic. Our long-range sensors have never detected fleet movements of this magnitude. Human fleet doctrine emphasizes distributed operations, Elena explained. Our ships typically operate individually or in small groups rather than large formations. They are also equipped with advanced stealth systems to minimize their sensor signatures. Dr. Velthari's energy field flickered with agitation. Stealth systems? You mean your ships have been moving through our space undetected? Elena chose her words carefully. Human vessels respect all territorial boundaries and follow established shipping lanes. However, our sensor technology may be more advanced than previously understood. The ethereal scientist began working frantically on her datapad, probably trying to recalculate the number of human ships that might have passed through ethereal space without being detected. The results would not be comforting. A new voice joined the discussion. Representative Morthak of the hegemony was an ancient being, even by his species' standards. His voice carried the weight of centuries of experience. Ambassador Vasquez, the Council is concerned about the strategic balance in this region of space. If humanity possesses military capabilities far beyond what we have previously understood, it raises questions about your people's intentions. Elena had expected this concern as well. Human policy regarding the use of force has not changed, Representative Morthak. We remain committed to peaceful resolution of conflicts and respect for the sovereignty of all Council member species. But surely you understand our position, Representative Zektar said. From our perspective, we have just learned that one of our member species has been concealing military capabilities that could potentially threaten every other civilization in the galaxy. We have not been concealing anything, Elena replied firmly. We have simply not had occasion to demonstrate our full capabilities. The weapons exhibition was the first time anyone asked us to show what our technology could accomplish. General Tekvar leaned back in his chair, his rocky features thoughtful. Ambassador, I must ask directly, could human forces defeat the combined fleets of the Galactic Council? The chamber fell completely silent. Elena could feel the weight of 47 different species waiting for her answer. The question was both simple and incredibly complex, involving not just military capabilities but politics, logistics, and strategic considerations. General, Elena said slowly, I hope we never have to find out. Her non-answer was perhaps more frightening than a direct response would have been. The aliens were left to draw their own conclusions about human military strength, and those conclusions were uniformly sobering. Representative Zektar consulted with his advisors for several minutes before addressing the chamber again. The Council will need time to review these revelations and their implications for galactic security. Ambassador Vasquez, we request that you remain available for additional discussions over the coming days. Of course, Representative, Elena agreed. As the session adjourned, Elena noticed that several alien delegations were already engaged in urgent conversations. Military advisors were streaming out of the chamber, probably to file emergency reports with their respective governments. The political landscape of the galaxy was about to change dramatically. Admiral Krikstal approached Elena as she gathered her materials. Ambassador, I meant what I said about mutual defense agreements. The Zephyrian Republic would be very interested in formalizing our relationship with Earth. Elena smiled politely. I will convey your interest to the appropriate authorities. Admiral. As she left the chamber, Elena ref 3 days after the weapons demonstration, Elena sat in her quarters aboard the human diplomatic ship, reviewing the flood of communications that had arrived from across the galaxy. Her desk was covered with formal requests for meetings, proposals for military cooperation agreements, and urgent diplomatic notes requesting clarification of human intentions. Sarah Chen entered with another stack of data pads. The latest batch of responses from Earth Command, she announced, setting them down carefully. Admiral Harrison wants a full briefing on the political fallout. Defense Minister Park is asking for detailed assessments of alien reactions, and President Kumar sends her congratulations on a job well done. Elena picked up the top data pad and scanned its contents. Any word from the Council about reclassification procedures? Representative Zektar's office sent a preliminary schedule. They want to conduct formal interviews with our military attachés, review technical specifications for our major weapon systems, and observe additional demonstrations of human technology. How many additional demonstrations? Sarah consulted her notes. They have requested to see our defensive systems, electronic warfare capabilities, and what they are calling representative samples of current generation offensive weapons. I think they want to see a Mark 15th railgun in action. Elena leaned back in her chair. The aliens were being thorough, but that was to be expected. The Council had built its entire security framework around the assumption that they understood the military capabilities of all member species. Learning that their assessment of humanity was off by several orders of magnitude had shaken their confidence in everything else. A soft chime indicated an incoming communication. Elena activated her wall screen to see Admiral Krikstal's face appear. The Zephyrian officer looked tired, as if he had been working around the clock since the demonstration. Ambassador Vasquez, he said with a respectful nod, I hope I am not disturbing you. Not at all, Admiral. What can I do for you? I wanted to inform you that the Zephyrian Republic has formally withdrawn from the Hegemony's Mutual Defense Pact. We are interested in negotiating a bilateral agreement with Earth instead. Elena was not entirely surprised by this news, but the speed of the decision was impressive. That is a significant policy change, Admiral. May I ask what prompted such a rapid decision? Krikstal's expression was grim. Our military analysts have been working nonstop since your demonstration. Their conclusions are sobering. If the information you shared with the Council is accurate, then the traditional alliance structures in this region are obsolete. How so? The hegemony's military doctrine is based on mass formations of heavily armored ships using energy weapons and defensive screens. Your kinetic weapons would cut through our formations like they did not exist. Our allies cannot protect us from a threat they cannot effectively counter. Elena nodded thoughtfully. And you believe an alliance with Earth would provide better security? We believe it would be preferable to be on the same side as the humans rather than opposed to them, Krixtal said bluntly. Our analysts estimate that the human fleet could defeat the combined hegemony forces in a matter of days, assuming you are willing to use your full capabilities. The communication ended with Krixtal promising to send formal proposals through diplomatic channels. Elena made notes for her response to Earth Command. The political realignment that was beginning would have implications far beyond military considerations. Another chime announced a second incoming call. This time, Dr. Velthari's ethereal features appeared on the screen. The ethereal scientist looked even more troubled than Admiral Krixtal had. Ambassador, she said without preamble, I have been analyzing the residual exotic matter signatures from your weapon's impact. The results are quite disturbing. In what way, Doctor? The tungsten projectile created quantum fluctuations in local space-time. These fluctuations should not be possible with conventional kinetic weapons. I believe your projectile was moving fast enough to approach relativistic mass energy equivalents. Elena had expected this analysis. Human physicists had long understood the relationship between velocity and mass in relativistic mechanics. That is correct, Doctor. At 12% of light speed, the projectile's relativistic mass was significantly greater than its rest mass. But the implications, Dr. Velthari continued, her voice filled with scientific excitement mixed with concern. If you can accelerate matter to truly relativistic speeds, you are essentially creating controllable antimatter weapons. The energy released from such impacts would rival our most powerful warheads. Our weapons engineers are well aware of the physics involved, Elena assured her. Human military doctrine includes strict protocols for the use of relativistic kinetic weapons. Dr. Velthari leaned closer to her communication screen. Ambassador, the Ethereal Science Council would like to propose a joint research initiative. Your people's mastery of electromagnetic acceleration could revolutionize our understanding of applied physics. In exchange, we could share our knowledge of dimensional manipulation and quantum field theory. Elena made another note. The offer was intriguing, but such decisions would need to be made by people far above her pay grade. I will forward your proposal to the appropriate authorities, Doctor. The day continued with a steady stream of communications from across the galaxy. The Deltran Confederation wanted to discuss upgrading their shipping contracts with human cargo companies, clearly hoping that improved economic ties would lead to security guarantees. The Corvan Trade Federation was offering unprecedented access to their commercial networks in exchange for human protection of their shipping lanes. Even species that had rarely interacted with humanity were reaching out. The isolationist Lumari had sent a formal message expressing their desire to reassess their relationship with the human species in light of recent revelations. The warlike Kreth, who had previously dismissed humans as weak, were now requesting permission to send military observers to Earth. Sarah entered Elena's quarters again, this time carrying a sealed diplomatic pouch. Priority message from Earth Command, she announced. Admiral Harrison's personal authorization. Elena opened the pouch and read the contents carefully. The message was brief but significant. Earth Command had decided to accelerate the timeline for revealing human military capabilities. Rather than allowing the information to leak out gradually, they wanted to conduct a comprehensive demonstration for the Galactic Council. Interesting, Elena murmured. Sarah, how quickly could we arrange for a fleet demonstration? What kind of demonstration? Sarah asked. Elena handed her the message. Sarah read it quickly, her eyes widening as she processed the implications. They want to show them everything? Sarah asked. Representative samples of current human military technology, Elena corrected. Not everything, but enough to establish credibility. How many ships are we talking about? Elena consulted the message again. Admiral Harrison is authorizing a battle group demonstration. That would be approximately 20 ships, including at least one dreadnought. Sarah whistled softly. Human dreadnoughts were the most powerful ships in the fleet, mounting dozens of Mark 15th railguns and advanced defensive systems. No alien species had ever seen one in action. When do they want to conduct this demonstration? As soon as arrangements can be made with the Council, Elena replied. I suspect Representative Zektar will be very interested in the proposal. Elena activated her communication system and sent a request for an immediate meeting with the Council leadership. The response came back within minutes. Representative Zektar would see her within the hour. As Elena prepared for the meeting, she reflected on how much had changed in just a few days. The simple weapons demonstration had triggered a cascade of political realignments that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. Species that had dominated galactic politics for millennia were scrambling to adapt to a new reality where humanity was revealed as a major military power. The irony was not lost on her. For centuries, humans had been quietly building one of the most powerful fleets in known space. While being dismissed as primitive newcomers, they had developed weapons that made the galaxy's most advanced military technology seem obsolete, all while being relegated to minor roles in galactic politics. Now everything would change. The laughter and mockery that had greeted her ancient railgun had been replaced by respect, fear, and desperate attempts to curry favor with Earth. Admiral Crixtol's transformation from arrogant superiority to respectful cooperation was being repeated across dozens of species. Elena gathered her materials and headed for the council chambers. The meeting with Representative Zektar would determine how quickly the full scope of human capabilities would be revealed to the galaxy. Based on the reactions she had already seen, it would be quite a demonstration. As she walked through the corridors of Nexus Prime, Elena noticed that the other diplomats and military officers she passed now treated her with a deference that had been completely absent just days before. Word of the weapons demonstration had spread throughout the station, and everyone understood that the quiet human ambassador represented a power that could no longer be ignored. She smiled to herself.